1964 was the year that I first encountered Aurora monster models. I'd never really heard of them before, and we had gone to a Pay and Save, which is a store in Eastport Plaza. It's no longer there now, of course, but at the time it was about like a Rite Aid store is now, or a Payless Drugs. It was a pretty good-sized store, and it had a good variety department, a toy department. And I was there, my mom was getting something, and I was just wandering around, and I went to the model section. And there was these shelves. I mean, there were so many models on the shelves. And I remember when I looked up and I saw my first Aurora monster model. It was the Hunchback of Notre Dame. And I was just transfixed. I could not take my eyes off of it. And it was probably the most fascinating thing I'd ever seen. I was really into monsters and monster movies. And this was my very first adventure with Aurora monster models. And I remember riding home in the backseat of the car, and the box was rattling, and the paint job on the cover of the box was just so good. I was so excited, and I just couldn't wait to get home and get started on this thing. And when I got home, finally, and I got the shrink wrap off the box and opened it up and looked inside at all the pieces and the parts, it was just, it was more amazing opening the box and seeing all that stuff than I had anticipated. So naturally, I couldn't wait to get my hands into this thing. And I remember it was either on the kitchen table or on a coffee table. I believe it was a coffee table in the living room where we spread out some newspapers all over. And I had my paints out and the glue and all this stuff and was looking at the instructions, trying to follow the instructions. And I remember painting them. It said, paint the pieces first. And my brothers were telling me, paint them first, don't be an idiot. So I was... at 9 years old, I wasn't the best model builder. In fact, I was a terrible model builder. And I was a terrible painter. I'm an artist and illustrator by trade now, but then I was a terrible model painter. And I was just splashing on color wherever I thought color should go. And I was putting it together, and I remember that the pieces weren't quite dry yet, and I was getting a little antsy, wanting them to be dry, and they'd stick to my fingers and then stick to the newspaper. And I used to get $2 a month allowance, and I would spend that full allowance on model kits. So I believe the next two kits I bought were the Wolfman and the Mummy. Now, the Mummy was really a challenge. The Wolfman wasn't too hard to do. He's pretty easy. The Mummy seemed to be more of a challenge, and I'm just wondering if maybe the parts didn't fit together as easy as they should have or what. But again, I had the same paint challenges. I'd paint the color I wanted on him and lay my brush down. The brush would dry to the newspaper and stick to it, and the pieces would stick to my hands, and it'd be these long strings of glue, and it was really funny. But I really loved the Mummy. I think it was one of my favorite kits when it was finally finished. And, of course, the box art. I'd stand these boxes up on my dresser, and they'd be looking back at me at night, and I'm just thinking how really wonderful they were. And kind of creepy, but just wonderful all the same. As I collected these, this was in going from autumn to winter of 1964. And it was really cold outside, and it was gray. And I remember sometimes building these things, I'd be hearing Bewitched on TV and the Addams Family and some of the greatest shows that were on TV at the time. After the Mummy, I decided to get Dracula, and I ended up getting Frankenstein last, but I got Dracula, and then I got the Phantom of the Opera, which is what I call two kits in one. The Phantom of the Opera was amazing. That was their best one as far as I was concerned. And it had the really freaky painting on the box art. Couldn't get over that face, couldn't get it out of my mind. The kit itself was pretty fun. It was really hard gluing the cape on and making it stay on because it was so heavy. It was one solid piece of plastic, so it weighed more than the rest of it. But I call it two kits in one because of that great scene at the bottom with the prisoner in the dungeon and all the skin ripped off his arms and his face and stuff. And it was just really hideous and gory and all the good stuff that kids love, I remember painting that one. I think I did a better paint job on that one, but I was still getting a little sloppy with my work and everything. I then got Frankenstein, and Frankenstein was too easy for me. It didn't have much to it, and it was kind of a disappointment, so I'm glad I got that one last. Those kits were a blast, just putting those first Aurora kits together. And I can remember the smell of the paint thinner and the smell of the enamels themselves and the paints and the glue. And it was just, you get that dry, crusty glue on the ends of your fingers. You could peel it off. off your fingers, and just looking at the instructions and standing up the boxes on my dresser, all of it was just too perfect. I really loved those Aurora monster kits, and I built those first ones in autumn and winter of 1964.